Welcome to Reddit Aliens. What is a traumatic experience that you think about till this day? How did it affect you? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. My nephew was on hospice, dying of lymphoma. I went home to sleep. 1 a.m. the phone rings. It is my mom, telling me my sister died, nephew's mom. My nephew wakes up from a coma the next morning, wanting to call his mom. Had to tell him she passed. He died 7 days later. I was at his bedside until he passed. What? My dad got me ringside seats at the circus once when I was young. They had a tiger, different times. The tiger decided to take a wet 8-pound poo right on the edge of the stage near us, and a piss to go with it. The stench was unimaginable. People were puking. Everyone was retching. People 6 rows up were scrambling for the exits. People even ended up trying to ask for their money back and refused to return even when the hard mess was cleaned up. It was impressive. To this day, I can't see big cats the same way. I have a really strong stomach, but wow, their digestive system must really pack a punch. One winter when I was homeless, an old guy let me stay in his garage in exchange for sex. First night, he had me shower while he filmed me on his camcorder. It was humiliating, but at the same time, I hadn't washed for almost a month and the hot water was heavenly. The old guy then started washing my body, soaping me up, putting shampoo in my hair, the whole combination of disgust, sickening intimacy as he groped and rubbed me, mixed with pleasure at being warm and clean and knowing I was going to eat and have a place to sleep. It was a twisted up feeling that sticks in my mind like a rusty fishhook, even all these years later. More than the sex and other stuff, that first shower was the most traumatizing. Now when I shower, I still get that flashback emotion, especially when the warm water hits my back on my neck. I face the shower head now. That helps a bit. When I was in Iraq, I was the driver for a route clearance team looking for IEDs. Every night we'd go over the same routes and chuck glow sticks into places we thought were a bit sketchy. One night, my sergeant sitting shotgun opened the door to throw a glow stick out at the jammers started going off and he just shouted, "Drive, drive, drive!" I slammed on the gas pedal and peeled out of there. Turns out we were parked up next to a giant 155 mortar round and there were people trying to detonate it on us. The whole experience of driving in a war zone and specifically a route clearance team has changed the way I drive completely. Before I went to Iraq, I was a reckless driver that thought I was invincible. I'm in the complete opposite now. My dad tried to commit suicide by shooting himself in the stomach in front of us. I remember him bleeding out on the carpet. He survived, but my parents divorced soon after. There's also the fact that I was physically abused by a close family member who was supposed to watch me when my parents were at work. They said they would kill me if I ever told, so I didn't tell until I was an adult. My parents believed me and cut off all relations with that family member. I wondered for a long time why I had such a complex with using public bathroom stalls. Years and years I wasn't comfortable and just wouldn't do it. I'd literally let myself become constipated for over a day before getting back to my house after sleepovers. And I remembered one day something at the Zellers down the road from my house when I was maybe 10. Zellers was the Canadian equivalent to Walmart in the 90s. I was in the stall and all of a sudden a man's head started to slide under the door, face up with his hands gripping the bottom of the door. I was completely unprepared, as expected, and I stomped on his face with my winter boot. He left, and that was it. I'm pretty sure he was mentally challenged. I remember his mannerisms and seeing him around the store other times. He was kind of like a child, and in a way, I think I stomped on his strange little bubble in that moment. I'm not really convinced he was a pedophile or anything. That's why I don't really feel like it was a sexual assault. I don't feel violated or anything, never have. I just think he was confused or lost, but it definitely resonated with me and effed me up for longer than I understood, until later in life. I was sexually assaulted when I was a teenager. It affected me in a lot of ways. It made me really distrustful of people, especially men, for a long time. I had a lot of trouble trusting myself and my own judgment, and I struggled with self-esteem issues for a long time. It took me a long time to start feeling like I could trust myself again. I was around 9, and my brother had gone into a complete mental spiral. He was 6 years old. I was sitting on the couch surfing channels to watch when I heard a blood-curdling scream. I peeked through the blinds. He was outside holding a large kitchen knife to his wrist, just absolutely screaming about how much he wanted to off himself. I have a hard time describing what it was like as I was 9, and my parents don't see the effect it had on me, but it was traumatic and haunts me, as do many other events my parents don't see the same way I do. I was a child. As much as I work on it in therapy, my brother's actions, way more than I've described, have affected me deeply. How's he now? Cleaning up my brother-in-law's suicide. I did it so my sister and parents wouldn't have to. At the mortuary, I also had to look at him to see if he was okay enough for family to view before he was embalmed. He wasn't. I can still see the hole in his head. Before he was buried, my sister asked me to place items in his coffin for her, as she didn't want to see him. She asked me to put a few things in his hands, and I did. The most traumatizing part? Having his 2 brothers and sisters watch me, then hug me as they stared lovingly at him. I hated him so much for what he did, for what I had to do because of him, and then I had to pretend to love him so they didn't have a bad experience. I don't know how I kept a straight face during that. After we got evicted, my mom abandoned my sister and me in a shitty motel room. One night, there was all this screaming from the room next door, and we listened as a woman gets beaten up by 2 men. Cops come, sirens and lights and more yelling, people slamming into the door of our room, etc. The whole time, me and my sister were just hiding in the bathroom with the door shut and the lights out, holding each other and trying not to cry. We were so scared the cops would knock on our door and find out we were alone and take us away before our mom came back for us. It was decades ago, but I still get that scared feeling when I hear sirens and see the lights flashing or hear the static crackle and voices on walkie-talkies. When I was 8, I woke up from a coma after a plane crash. I was unable to talk and partially paralyzed. I also had retrograde amnesia and could not recognize anyone nor myself. Since I couldn't speak, no one knew I had amnesia. I spent the first month thinking I was dreaming because I didn't know anyone. When I got released from the hospital, the man I had learned was my father sat me down and told me my mother had died in the crash. He was flying. I started crying because I knew then it wasn't a dream and something terrible had happened. Never have had any memories of my mother. Sorry. Being robbed at gunpoint. Also, seeing pictures of my best friend laying in the road unconscious when he was robbed or beaten and murdered, as he ended up dying in the hospital 6 days later. Aside from just shit between my parents and I from my childhood, I think I'm really deeply affected from my last relationship with someone who had severe and crippling mental illness. A lot of things happened over the course of that relationship due to his illness, and none of them were positive. Drove my car into a tree. My girlfriend was in the seat next to me and my brother, paramedic, in the back seat behind me. Girlfriend immediately starts complaining about a heaviness on her chest and then falls unconscious 10 seconds later. My brother immediately jumps into action, lays the back seat down, back when I had my Tahoe, so it's about the size of a queen bed, and drags her back and starts checking her out and starting CPR. Meanwhile, I flip the car in reverse and gun it probably 90 miles an hour down the street towards the hospital. The car still operated well enough to drive. We finally get there, and they're taking her out, and a nurse comes over to check us out. My brother had a concussion, and I had so much adrenaline rushing through me that I didn't realize I had a 6-inch piece of steel from my car lodged half-inch below my kidney, and I immediately pass out when I realize it. Turns out, I was much worse off than my girlfriend, who just had a broken rib and a concussion. Before y'all ask, no, I wasn't drunk. No, I wasn't trying to kill us. No, I wasn't distracted. It was very icy, and a car cut us off and I lost control and rammed into a tree. TLDR. Drove 90 miles an hour in a crashed car with a 6-inch piece of metal lodged in me. I watched someone I love pull the trigger using a shotgun the moment I walked down to the foggy pond by myself with my Pokemon cards right after I got home from school. The pond was in the back of my family's farmhouse. To see someone's head get blown off right after he smiled seconds before really slowed down time a lot for me, even years later. It didn't scare me or make me cry. I just felt this sense of relief for him. I was 9 or 10 when this happened. He was suffering a lot mentally, and told me the night before he was going on a trip that he's been looking forward to. I'm going on 36, and when I think about that day, I always knew he was finally at peace. I have an eating disorder and had to go to the hospital for it a few times. The first time is specifically the most traumatic because there were a lot of bulimics there and they threw up very often, all over the place. Note that I have very severe emetophobia, a fear of vomiting and choking. I remember this girl particularly because she apparently had discharged a few months prior, doing a lot better, at a relatively safe weight. But when I saw her when she came in, she was extremely thin and looked on the brink of death. She purged, threw up, every single thing she ate or drank. If we didn't eat the solid food, we had to drink Ensure nutritional supplement, and she would even purge that, and it would come out the way it went in if you hadn't had anything else. Most of the time, if someone purged, mind you that this was on the floor, the bathrooms were locked and we were on a bathroom schedule. We couldn't go until an hour after a meal, and if it was an emergency, off the schedule, they had to watch us piss. They'd just keep us in the dining room and shut the door. I was an adolescent, and our dining room was smaller and in a totally separate room because it was right after the meal. This time was completely different. I had family therapy over the phone with my dad, and he was coming to pick me up. Individual and family therapies are outside of the group therapies, so everyone else was in the group. I had a half day. I was in partial hospitalization at that point, so I was there from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. every day. But this day, I got to leave between lunch and dinner, and I was walking with the therapist to the door so I could go home. But to do that, we passed through the dining hall, and this girl was on her hands and knees in a pool of her own regurgitated nutritional supplement. It was the strawberry flavor. It's been years, and I still haven't forgotten. My dad committed suicide. I was the last person to see him alive before he walked out, drove to the middle of nowhere and swallowed a bunch of chemicals. His body was found 6 months later. He was listed as missing for that period of time. My mom and him were having troubles. I was a pissy teenager who was not much help. I remember him looking at me before leaving the house for the last time. I did not say anything nice. I did not try to stop him. If only I could have said something. He was a good guy, very lonely, probably depressed for a long time. He realized he's lonely, getting old, life didn't turn out the way he wanted. Love in the marriage died a long time ago. His kids were not attached to him. He had nothing to lose, so what did he do? But he looked at me before he left. I remember that look to this day. I wake up screaming next to my wife, crying like a kid. Dad, wait up, don't go. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry I was a pissy teenager, ungrateful, unable to establish a connection with you and give you something worth sticking around for. We'd make a good team right now. I'm sorry, Dad. I love you. My dad got mad at me for not saying hi due to me having earbuds in, threw me into my room, whooped and beat me with a stick, basically told me to never talk because I make everyone feel uncomfortable. I became depressed that I considered running away or putting myself up for adoption. I even looked up ways to do it in adoption centers near me. Then, when I returned home, I was an anxious mess, but my parents decided to act like nothing happened. Now, every time I hear them throw things, I jump. I'm anxious at home 24/7, no joke. I never have a moment to relax. I overthink things like making sure that they can hear me greet them, making sure I did my chores, making sure I didn't miss the trash can in the bathroom when drying my hands. I'm an anxious mess thanks to them, and recently told them about my anxiety, but I couldn't tell them that they were the reason it's so severe. I can't relax, and I feel very useless, to the point where waking up in the morning fills me with dread.